Whatever we may do and say will be for the benefit and the good of Jamaica, land we love. For these and every mercies that we ever ask in your Son's name, Jesus Christ, we ask. Amen.
Thank you. Any apologies? No apologies for absence. Well, it is for me to welcome everyone here this morning. Welcome members. Welcome the Auditor General. And welcome Ms. Blake and her team from Finance. Welcome the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and her team, and the executives and staff from the Caribbean Maritime University. I should mention that we have received 3 copies of a large document. I believe it's nearly 650 pages from the ministry, and it basically contains copies of a lot of material, vouchers, memoranda of understanding, and other documents. In the form that it's in, it will be difficult to manage. It would be helpful if we could get this in a ring binder format so we can flip. Also, I would ask if copies could be made for you have one. Okay, and yours is bound. Okay. All right, great. All right, well that'd be good. Thank you. So this is both of these are this. Is that right? Okay. Member Clark, you would like one of these as well? I suppose every member wants one. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Members, I also wanted to take this opportunity to refer you and those in attendance to the Senate and House of Representatives Powers and Privileges Act, which governs proceedings before committees such as this. Just to remind persons who are giving testimony here, Section 16 makes it an offense to give a false answer to any question that's material to the subject of inquiry before this committee. And if any person intentionally does so, then that is an offense under the Perjury Act, and the penalties prescribed by that act would apply on conviction. It is also an offense under Section 16 of the Senate and House of Representatives Powers and Privileges Act. Under Section 18, a person who presents to either House or committee, such as this, any false, untrue, fabricated, or falsified document with intent to deceive the committee commits a criminal offense. I think it's useful to bring that to the attention of everyone, just to remind them of the seriousness of the proceedings before this committee. I will move to the minutes. The minutes were circulated, members, by email. I will go through them page by page. Page 1. Page 2. On page 2, there's just one minor typo. In the paragraph, matters arising from the minutes, the first sentence under the caption there, or actually it's the beginning of the second sentence. It has Member Warmington, but it doesn't have a capital letter for his name. So that should be fixed. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6.
Chairman, on page 6,
Yes, sir.
the penultimate paragraph, and in that paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom of the paragraph, there are still programs being run by, I think is omitted there, Optimum.
Right, the word by after the word run. Page 7.
Second sentence, start of the second sentence in that paragraph, in that page 7, Dr. Brown reiterated that he had played not, I would suspect, is no part in contracting the entity.
Yes, I think the word part is missing after no. Thank you. Page 8.
Chairman, no, I want to go back to 7. We are there still. The minutes on the third paragraph, really.
Could you just say what words begin the paragraph? Because
Member Guy.
Okay.
I don't think the minutes were faithful to what actually happened, because the last sentence, he asked about the source of funding for these payments, particularly in light of the MOU which stated, etc., etc. The source of funding we're talking about just then was just as it relates to the launches, you know. My concern came a little later on as about the source of funding for the payments that were received by the various entities or the contractors who, particularly, as it said, Optimum Service Consultancy, and where that money would come from based on the agreement that was signed that CMU would get 30% of it. My concern, where was the money coming from? Was it not coming from CMU? Why then would they take 30% after?
Well, the sentence says he asked about the source of funding for these payments, particularly in light of the MOU which stated that Optimum Customer Service Consultancy would receive a certain amount and CMU would receive 30% of that amount. So...
No, I'm saying, Chairman, that statement by itself is not incorrect.
Okay.
But I'm saying where it is put in the minutes, I don't think it was reflected of the discussions there. I think it comes about 2 paragraphs down.
I see. So you'd like to move that sentence to the...
Yes, Chairman, to where just before you said the Chairman asked whether on this arrangement as per participant there was an amount that the funding agency would pay out for the training, and this amount would be split between CMU and its partners. It could come after that because
Okay.
Right.
All right, so it can become the final sentence of the penultimate paragraph on page 7. So that sentence could be moved. Thank you. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Would someone please move for the adoption of the minutes subject to those 2 or 3 amendments?
So moved, Chairman.
Moved by Dr. Guy, seconded by? Seconded by? Seconded by Member Bunting. Thank you. Okay, matters arising from the minutes. There are a number of
Page 3. Just seeking clarification. These matters arising.
Yeah, I was going to go through the matters. I have a guide for that the clerk has very kindly prepared. But if you want to go to page 3.
Yes, the second paragraph, the Auditor General requested all areas of dispute to be provided to her by the ministry, etc., etc. Has this been done?
Apparently not. P.S. The Auditor General, arising out of the discussions in the committee around some issues where, one in particular I think, where Ms. Hayden had stated facts that were inconsistent with what the report had said were the facts. The Auditor General has asked that all areas of where what the content of her report is disputed from a factual perspective, that those be identified and communicated to her so that she can do the necessary research on them. So that is an outstanding item, and perhaps we could formally request it so that it can be provided to the Auditor General. Now, members, I'm going to go through some matters that were extracted from the minutes by the committee clerk, who is not able to be here this week, but is being ably represented by Ms. Brandon. The first issue. The committee had agreed that Optimum Customer Service Consultancy should be invited to the committee for this meeting of the 16th of June to provide clarity on the arrangements which it has with the CMU, as well as the issues surrounding the lunch suppliers who had been paid to provide lunches for participants of one of the versions of the CAPIES program. By way of an update, the letter of invitation was emailed by the committee clerk to Mr. Joseph Martin, a principal of Optimum Customer Service Consultancy, and the hard copy was delivered by courier to the St. Anne address for Optimum. Mr. Martin responded to the email last Friday, June the 12th, indicating that he is not in the country, but that he would respond in writing on the 15th of June, that's yesterday, to the issues raised by the PAC, and that he is also available to appear before the PAC via video conferencing. The members should have received, I believe, by email the response, addressed to Gordon House to whom it may concern. Members have this? Yeah.
I must say, Chairman,
Yes, Member Warmington.
I'm offended the way this letter is addressed to whom it may concern. It was written by Parliament. I think it's highly disrespectful to be addressing this thing to whom it may concern. I found it offensive.
Members, the letter that he has written here of the 15th of June gives some useful information, but it's quite brief and it doesn't address, for example, one issue, which is how were the suppliers of the lunches selected. That is not addressed. And I think that was an area of interest to the committee.
Yes, I'd particularly asked if I'd hoped we would have been afforded some clarity on that. But in fact, what is interesting is that this learning readiness intervention that was delivered by Optimum, here we're being told that it was a community outreach. And they did it as a goodwill gesture to the young people of Jamaica. The LRI participants, as the Learning Readiness Intervention participants, were not required to pay any fee at all. The lunch suppliers were paid directly by CMU. Optimum was not entitled to and received absolutely no payment from CMU for delivering the LRI. This is quite extraordinary. So a service delivered as a goodwill gesture ends up costing CMI millions of dollars in lunches. When what we see here, Mr. Chairman, is no accounting for how many participants, how many young people participated in these free programs. Still no explanation of where these programs were delivered. No listing of the names of the beneficiaries. I would have thought that all these things would have been basic documentation that CMU would have required before paying tens of millions of dollars to lunch suppliers. I mean, I have to go back to the report to see just how much, to refresh myself on what was the total, but I know it was a significant sum of money. And it really points to a really cavalier approach that CMU has taken to taxpayers' money. Just another example of it, Mr. Chairman. But I would really, myself, speaking for myself, like to get a clearer set of answers to these questions that CMU or the ministry has been unable to provide, and hopefully there's a record of it somewhere, but it's certainly not in this response, this written response that Optimum has provided today.
Right. I think there was a document handed out to members or circulated to members with the MOU that provided for the 30% sharing, where there were a couple of sample invoices attached to that, but not by any means. They were more an indicative sample, it looked like to me, rather than a comprehensive listing of how those payments were being justified and what supporting documentation was provided to.
But those related to the MOU, and the MOU was part of this partnership, or described a partnership arrangement. The CAPS Learning Readiness Intervention, LRI, was not addressed by that MOU, Mr. Chairman. If I'm wrong, somebody can correct me. But as But as I recall, that was not addressed under the MOU. What we're being told here today is that the LRI was delivered by Optimum as a community outreach initiative on behalf of CMU. This was a goodwill gesture.
For which they weren't paid.
And the LRI, but neither were they paid, nor did the LRI participants
have to pay.
They were not required to pay any fee either. So the only persons who benefited financially from this exercise, as far as we can tell, are the launch suppliers.
Correct.
And
the only thing I would say is that the invoices,
paid handsomely.
It wasn't clear that the invoice is related to the MOU. It was quite difficult actually to identify what program the couple invoices that I saw anyway were attached to. But I was just only mentioning it because just to say that we were given a sort of a sample of something, but nothing comprehensive to show how these millions of dollars were justified.
And I guess I'm cross-referencing this correspondence today with that previous MOU and attached things to conclude that those had nothing to do with the MOU arrangements.
Yes, well, the MOU, interestingly, Optimum is saying in this letter that the MOU, which provided for some sharing of revenue for the tuition paid by the registrants, no course was submitted to CMU under that MOU, and so there was no revenue sharing. So,
I've just found a figure, Mr. Chairman. So the total...
What page are you on?
I'm on this table that was given to us by the Auditor General. Outlining the specific names of the individuals.
Right.
And I think it's somewhere in the report as well, but this is just, this lists the individuals who provided lunches for the CAP.
Page 1.
From?
Yes, Lady.
Mr. Chairman, as a point of correction, that table did not come from me. I believe that may have been prepared by the ministry. Just for the records.
This table here, which identifies the actual names versus the generic names.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. I thought we had requested it from you at one particular meeting. But nevertheless, it shows the 15 specific names of the individuals who provided lunch for the CAP Yes program, and it totaled $46.7 million. No, I'm assuming that this 46, we were then told that these suppliers were provided by Optimum or identified by Optimum as the suppliers.
Optimum is kind of indirectly confirmed because they do say that lunch suppliers suggested to CMU by Optimum in the letter.
Yeah, 46.7, right. So, and Member Phillips just pointed out to me that this is consistent with what is in the report in terms of the 46.7 million for the lunch suppliers. So just to using the previous documentation together with the one we have today, I would just like the CMU officials to confirm then that this 46.7 million paid to launch suppliers, to the 15 launch suppliers, relate to this goodwill gesture that Optimum carried out to train participants under the Learning Readiness Intervention Program exclusively.
Prof, can you respond to that?
Thank you very much, sir. With reference to the table that was supplied, I think the first 7 launch providers relate to Optimum. The others relate to programs and centers that the university operated by itself.
you're saying of the 15, the first 7, you said? How many you said related?
I think the first 7. Maybe you can. Let me pass this to you.
So Jimmy Smith, Jerome Green, Kerry Ann Rose, Kim Brown Lawrence, Maureen Blake, Nicole Ward, and Tasha Dawkins all are related to Optimum. And the rest?
Prof, just repeat what you said about the others. The others
Okay.
related to?
The others relate to programs and centers that were run by the university. What I'm saying in effect is that all those launch providers from St. Anne relate to Optimum.
So, for example, you're saying that supplier number 5, Dwayne Williams, whose occupation is listed as a lifeguard on the list of electors in Northwest St. Anne, that CMU identified this person. And could you tell me what program and what center he was providing lunches for?
Well, let me say specifically that 7 of all the launch providers, the 7 may not be in the order.
Oh,
which
not
it is
in the
listed.
order.
It
Okay.
may not be in the order, but there are 7.
Well, that's why I
Yes.
read out the names to ensure that I could you then go through and tell us which 7?
All right, I will refer that to Dr. Brown, who has more knowledge about this.
Dr. Brown, could you identify which of the 7 are those that were identified by Optimum to supply lunches?
Chairman, I don't have the benefit of that, the documentation specifying who the who the lunch suppliers for the learning readiness were, but I'm not going to be 100%, I can't be 100% certain, but what I know for sure is that this is a combination of lunches for that learning readiness, which is the version that Optimum attended to, as well as, like Professor Adraguna mentioned, the technology advancement program, and I think the CAPES multipurpose rating, which was resident at CMU.
So no one here is able to identify the 7 that were specifically.
Mr. Chair, if we can refer to Auditor General's report on page 24.
Where's the Optimum report?
24?
Yeah, page 24. And that is table 4, payments to launch providers. You will see listed there, CAPES, and then we have TAP at the bottom. All the CAPES is what I'm making reference to, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think 8 of them relate to the program.
So you're saying the
Run
8,
by Optimum.
the 8 listed here as CAPES were the ones sourced through Optimum for the learning readiness program.
That's correct, sir.
So that's individuals 1, 2, and 3.
There's 8 of them, I think.
Counselor 1, helper 2, individual 4, individual 5, and driver 2. So it is the 7 that it's the first 7 on this list plus 1, the 8th.
That's 8, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So if I could just continue then and ask, I assume in further questioning of Optimum, we can find out the basis on which they selected those, but for the time being, could you tell us the basis on which you selected the other 7 suppliers, and where did they supply? What were they, we see on the Auditor General's report the location of the business, but we have no idea which facilities or which programs of CMU they were supplying the lunches to. Can you advise us of that, Prof?
Okay, I will refer that question to Dr. Brown, because he manages all the TAP centers across the island. I don't know if you have it.
Yeah, but I don't think I need it at all. That's fine.
So Dr. Brown, the question is, as we understand it, there were 8 suppliers for the Learning Readiness Initiative those suppliers were identified by Optimum.
Mm-hmm.
The other 7 suppliers listed in the report, which were for other programs, CMU programs, were not identified by Optimum. So the question is, how were those suppliers selected? What was the process by which they were selected?
That one I can attend to. With respect to the Technology Advancement Program, which is TAP, and I did detail that in my written response. That particular program is funded by USF, delivered by CMU. The aim was for the program to enroll 1,000 participants across the entire island of Jamaica. There was the program was oversubscribed, which means that each location, what CMU got from you, CMU did no recruitment for this program because I spearheaded the coordination of that program. The participants for TAP were recruited via the offices of members of parliament. Those names were sent to USF. USF then sent those names to CMU. Good? When we initiated that particular program, and as someone who is coordinating, managing a program, I said to CMU, the president in particular, and the team, because they called me to a meeting about a week before, indicating that this particular program was supposed to launch next week. I asked for a list of confirmed participants for the program. That was not available. I was told that there would have been a launch at the Indoor Sports Center, and the participants would be coming from all parishes and they would attend to the registration at that point. I did raise objection, understanding the nature of program planning, that there's no way you can register 1,000 people in one day. And the plan was to register them using the CMU standard registration process. And we're talking about unattached youngsters. So we ended up at the Indoor Sports Center. The registration did not materialize. So all we got, Chairman, was that for St. Mary, 25. For Kingston and St. Andrew, I think they put it at 275. So we got a number for each parish. Yeah? We were also told that the participants were to be paid a stipend. And that stipend they would use to fund their transportation and pay for lunch. The stipend should have been paid, the first stipend should have been paid prior to the first day of instructions, which means they would have funding to take them into the first day. Well, it turns out that when we got into the first week, the participants did not receive that stipend. This continued, Chairman, for the most part, for most of the students, for almost 9 weeks, no payment. Up to week number 12, there were still persons indicating that they did not get a stipend. And the reason being, the approach that they were using to register the participants was requiring them to provide birth certificate, TRN, and all the standard things at CMU. We did forewarn them that these are unattached people. Chances are they won't have these documents. So since they did not have the requisite documents to be registered, there was no official list created. Added to the problem, they targeted unattached youth, and they gave each participant at the launch at the Indoor Sports Center 3 T-shirts. What we face at the location, and Chairman, just keep in mind that I am coordinating 14 locations across the island with 14 parish coordinators, telling me on a daily basis the horrors that they are going through. So you gave a number of, say, 75 to a particular parish. But what the coordinator at the parish actually encountered in reality is 3 times 75. Because you give one person 3 t-shirts and you say, well, you know, this program is paying a stipend, so people just started to show up. The 2 most problematic locations were Kingston at the YWCA and St. Catherine. On any given day in Kingston, we had on average 300 to 400 participants. Kingston's number was on that, the number that we got, we didn't get the names, was 275, I think. The first week when this started to unravel, I was only in charge of instructions, recruiting the instructors, training them, I designed the course. We had no responsibility for providing lunch. I was given a responsibility to seek out training venues. And I note in the Auditor General report, which is accurate, that procurement was not attended to. But what I was told is that I should find venues. So, and in trying to find venues, because I'm just going by instruction, I even called the PS, who I had some working relationship with before, and she helped by contacting school principals. That is how we came up with venues. So we did not go on any mission to breach procurement. We were just told to find venues. Find a school, find a church, and get the training going. But back to the lunch matter, Chairman. I went to the president when this started to unravel in week 1. And the USF representative was always on location. I said, look, if we don't pay them the stipend, we at least have to provide lunch for them. They said they are waiting to get the bank account sorted out so that they can be paid their stipend. I'm saying if they can't register for CMU, then how are you going to, if they don't have the requisite documents to register for CMU, how are they going to be able to open a bank account to get paid? They brought in NCB and it almost seemed like a song in my mind. They were going to quisk it and they were going to open a quisk account and I said to them, do like we have done with a program I have at Trenchtown. Pay them the stipend and let them fund themselves. NCB did not work out. They said they were going to make check payments. The check payment did not work out. And again, Chairman, we are running. Now, as a person who is coordinating this program and who is getting the calls on a daily basis, good? I literally said to the president, it looks like I've taken the keys to the Titanic. Somebody needs to address this matter. Because it cannot be that I'm in charge of instructions and I need now to resolve lunch matters. So we entered into no arrangement with any supplier contractually for lunches for 12 weeks, which is why, again, we did not go on any mission to breach procurement guidelines. When we gave them, we got to go ahead to give them lunch week 1, it was on the basis that by lunch 2, the stipend would have sorted out. Well, come week number 2, the stipend matter still did not sort out, and then the coordinators are calling me and said, look, we have to do something. And this continued week 3, week 4. I did indicate to the president and the then treasurer that why don't we just put a lunch arrangement in place? They did not want to go into any contracting because that was really not their remit. And if the stipend kicked in week 4, they didn't want to have a contract with someone to provide lunches for 12 weeks. Good? So we had someone on board who actually jumped in and served as the coordinator for lunch arrangement and president that, look, this thing has to be resolved. And that is when we took a decision, again, not a long-term decision because it was based on if they start to get the stipend next week, we'll stop the arrangement. Well, that continued. So with respect to the lunch providers for TAP, Mr. Eugene Williams, who served as a person who, I just had an ad hoc way, find people who could deliver lunch. He worked out an arrangement with a lunch supplier because, again, we did not have the budget to buy lunch up front. So the lunch providers in this situation and the payment that they receive is all after the fact. As a matter of fact, we still have 2 people who have not been paid in full for lunches because it was a matter of we are asking people to provide lunches and we'll pay them at a later date. So one lunch supplier actually assisted us in connecting with other lunch suppliers, so we could, the location in Montego Bay, the location in Kingston, St. Catherine, they were provided lunch. They were paid upfront by that lunch supplier, or they were paid at a delayed basis. Good? So it's just to underscore that the lunch arrangement was never an original part of the program design. Good?
Just to note that, I mean, one supplier was paid over $16 million. That supplier is based in St. Anne, O'Neill Shaw. One other supplier was paid $4.5 million. That person's based at the main campus, concessionaire 1, which is Ian's catering service. The others were $1 million or less. They were paid. So with this, so what you're describing, Dr. Brown, is an arrangement that was brought into effect somewhat at the last minute because of a sort of crisis that was unfolding with the delay in the payment of the stipend.
Precisely.
And the need to provide lunches for the participants.
Precisely so, Chairman. And again, there was never any established arrangement initially that this thing would continue. Right. Because it's, week 1 when we did this, we were of the view that the stipend would have kicked in week 2, and we kept going that way in a sort of...
And the actual suppliers to the TAP program were introduced by a gentleman who sourced that gentleman was himself a supplier and sourced the other suppliers?
Yes.
Okay.
And as the report indicates, would have some of the suppliers, and again, it's the reporting from the different locations. Mm-hmm. You would find a supplier who is willing to provide a lunch and be paid a week later or a month later. Most people wanted the money up front. We did not have a budget for that. Good. Mm-hmm. And again, we're just going by the fact that it was either we provided them with lunch and they weren't getting the stipend, or I said to the president, let's shut this program down.
Mm-hmm. So the name you called isn't any one of the 7, though?
Say that again?
The name that you mentioned.
No, because that individual is paid by CMU, okay. Was on board, wasn't recruited as a lunch provider. Because Chairman at YWCA, and again I would encourage us to gain greater awareness. If you USF has the videos of this. If you look at the Kingston location and St. Catherine, and so the number of people we have in those 2 training interventions, good, you'll understand, and certainly because the cost is, compared to the number of people who are attending to, is not by any means exorbitant. And again, part of the reason, Chairman, is that given the fact that people were just walking in, and we were not able, as the entity coordinating the training, we were not able to determine who is legitimately a participant as opposed to who is not. Because all we got was, we didn't get names, we got a number. And then people started, so you give one person 3 t-shirts, that person just gives away 2, and people started showing up. Which is why one of the things I did, I reached out to USF and I said, you must have a representative on location, because we are not at liberty of turning back anyone who is showing up for training. It was.
Yeah. Remember, it was my question, Mr. Chairman. I have some follow-ups. Yeah. I had asked Dr. Brown for the 7 suppliers for the TAP program, which he was in charge of, if he could say how those 7 suppliers were chosen. what he has described in response is a very chaotic situation that seemed to have prevailed at the time. But out of the chaos, he has still not identified, or I still haven't been able to ascertain how these suppliers were selected. And just, so let me rephrase my question. Dr. Brown, you said this TAP program was being delivered in Mobay, Kingston, and St. Andrew, and St. Catherine, rather?
All 14 parishes.
It was in all 14 parishes. So these 7 suppliers were, so this chaotic situation you described was taking place in all 14 parishes?
Yes, Member Bunting, because they, remember, remember again, the chaotic situation, the genesis of it, what I'm indicating is that lunch was never a part of this arrangement. Good. If the participants had received their stipend, which was promised to them, then we would not have been forced to go in that particular direction.
So can I then assume, since you're saying the participants were identified by members of parliament?
That is the nature of the TAP program, yes.
So the more populous parishes would have had more participants. So I assume, for example, Kingston and St. Andrew and St. Catherine would probably have had half of the total of all the participants.
That is so.
So then explain to me why you would have chosen the main supplier for these lunches to be someone based in St. Anne, fairly remote from the main places that the lunches were delivered. Why would you, for example, have selected a lifeguard whose address is on Main Street in Runaway Bay to supply 680,000 lunches? I'm just trying to find out how these persons were selected.
All right. That. Not impossible.
Thank you for trying to assist, but that is speculation. That will help us.
Like I did indicate in my response that when the situation started to unravel, we assigned someone who was on board as a program assistant to just take responsibility for ensuring that lunches get to the location.
A program assistant to TAP?
To TAP.
Is somebody employed by CMU?
Yes, Eugene Williams is the name, and he was duly enrolled and he's on the payroll.
So he's still employed to...
No, it was just for the project.
It was just a project
just
employee.
For the project. And he's the one who helped out by reaching out to lunch supply. Now the lunch supply for the TAP is not... certainly did not go to someone in St. Anne to supply lunches all across the island. The lunch supply Mr. Williams engaged is... The location is on Mullines Road, Harris Catering. Mr. Shaw only acted on behalf of the owner who lives overseas in terms, and these, by the way, Mr. Shaw initially submitted the original invoices from the suppliers, the actual suppliers of the lunches. We were told, and he was asking for reimbursement, good? And we were told that reimbursement cannot be accommodated, good? So that is when he actually submitted subsequent invoice for direct payment to him.
So now we're hearing that supplier one, in fact, was not supplier one.
Say that again?
We're hearing that supplier one, O'Neill Shaw, was not in fact the supplier of the lunches.
Yeah, but we did say in the written report we indicated
Harris Catering was the supplier of the lunches.
Right.
And this...
No. Chairman, no. Harris Catering was the entity that Mr. Williams engaged. And it's the owner of that is a gentleman named Mr. Fitz Bradley. So Mr. Bradley is the one, Mr. Shaw acted because Mr. Bradley is not resident in Jamaica. And the payments were extremely late, with Mr. Bradley simply asked Mr. Shaw to act on his behalf, to collect the payment from CMU and pay the person who would have provided the lunches.
So Mr. O'Neill Shaw advanced $16 million to Mr. Bradley to
Did not say
the
that,
Harris
member.
Catering
Did
owned by
not
Mr.
say that.
Sorry?
Did not say, no, we did not say that.
But you just said he provided it for reimbursement.
Yeah, but
he
I
showed
said-
you the original invoices, which were to be reimbursed to him.
Mhm.
The value here on the table is $16,150,000, and you are now expecting us to believe that a Mr. O'Neill Shaw advanced $16 million in lunches to the CMU on behalf of Harris Catering, whose principal is overseas. That is straining credibility.
The written
Dr.
response, Chairman, the written response, we did indicate that not all the suppliers were paid up front, because some of the suppliers were only paid when the monies were received from CMU. We did indicate that in the written response. So there's no declaration of advancing. And I did say initially that
You just said to us that Mr. Shaw asked that provided you original invoices from Harris Catering, and he should have been paid that money because he had advanced. He was to be reimbursed, I think is the word you use. He was to be reimbursed. You then advised that reimbursements couldn't be accommodated, and therefore Mr. Shaw now had to become the principal, so as a principal supplier, so that he could get his reimbursement.
Yeah. But the reimbursement is not 100%. It's not, and that is documented.
So what you're saying is that it isn't the entire 16.1 million was reimbursed, but some portion thereof.
Exactly. Because as is Chairman, as is indicated in the report, there and the records from the Treasury should show that I had to foot the bill for lunches on some days.
You personally?
Yes. There was one case where the Clarendon location called me to say, look, we can't carry on, the people need food. I had to go to, if I just spell it, I had to go to Juicy Party in Halfway Tree. I had to use my credit card to make a payment to the manager there, and that manager called Clarendon to say, yes, we had the payment, we have received the payment, and then they delivered food for them down there. That is how chaotic the situation was. I say most of the amounts that are stated now, cumulatively, it seems exorbitant, but having what we call trust lunches for the participants on an ongoing basis, and so for Kingston and St. Catherine, we have 3 or 4 people delivering lunches to meet the demand on a particular day.
All I would say in closing, Mr. Chairman, that what Dr. Brown has described, and he has described a situation that continued, not just for the first day or for the first week, but for weeks.
It did, member.
And this just demonstrates an entity with a complete disregard for proper governance, for appropriate management. It is just astounding listening to how tens of millions of dollars were spent. And this is just on the lunches. We don't reach the rest of the program yet. Just for these top students, $20 million in absolute confusion in lunches, or top participants, I should say. And then we still have yet to get to the other 20 million or so, whatever the difference is, approximately 20 million for the lunches for the CAPS that we still have to ask Optimum to explain how those suppliers were selected.
Yeah, Dr. Guy.
I have a little difficulty here. Can we explain how Harris Catering was the contracted entity, and then we are seeing a Mr. O'Neill? Yes. Chairman, I was asking if Harris Catering was the contracted entity, then how do we explain O'Neill Shaw, I think is the name, being the recipient of the payment? I would have thought that if Harris Catering was the entity, then the invoices would have come to the CMU in Harris Catering's name. Now, I heard what Dr. Brown said, but I would like a little more clarification on the whole issue. Why? I understand what he said, that the owner was abroad, but if Harris Catering is a legally incorporated entity, it don't need for you to say that give the payment to someone else. Because if the business was running, and we can only speculate right now, but who was running the business? Was it Mr. O'Neill Shaw, or Mr. O'Neill Shaw just came on board to collect on behalf of Harris Catering?
Chairman, what I have indicated is that the owner for that particular restaurant, that is the owner's decision. The owner asked this gentleman to act on his behalf to receive the payment from CMU and to pay all the people who are owed for lunches.
I have one question. CMU was providing the instruction. That was your primary role, is to design the courses and implement the courses, instructing for this TAP. It was a USF's program, really. They were the ones who solicited the participants and so on. Why did you decide to take on the responsibility of delivering lunches when the crisis unfolded? Why didn't you say to USF, this is not CMU's role, you are the principals on whose behalf we're delivering the instruction, we can't take this on? Why did you decide to take it on?
We did give that indication, Chairman, I did give that indication, which is why...
But nevertheless, you did proceed to make the arrangements and you did incur the costs. I mean, this money, for the TAP, whatever that figure adds up to, 20 million or thereabouts, was that reimbursed by USF? Who was supposed to absorb that cost, since lunches were never part of the original program?
Chairman, like I've indicated, what I did, because I certainly am not, I didn't work for USF. I went to the president and I said, look, this situation has to be resolved. So it's either we, and I was very blunt, it's either we get this payment thing sorted out, because I don't want to pay them a cash stipend. I said it's either we find a way to pay them, or at least we have to make sure that they have sustenance.
The stipend payments were made by who, ultimately?
The stipend payment is the remit of USF.
USF dealt with that?
Yes, and again, that should have been paid. They should have been a sort of...
From up front. They was sort of mobilize the students to come. I understand that. But so the lunches that you ended up taking on board as your responsibility, who bore that cost ultimately?
Well, that, as far as I know, that's CMU, because I don't know that USF has provided any sort of reimbursement. And again, what I did, I went to, I am acting on the directive of CMU, so there is no need for me to, I didn't negotiate with USF for this program. Good? But what I encounter and what's going on the ground, I indicated to the president that, look, all these arrangements that they are talking about, quiz payment and check payment, it's not working out. Good? And we were hopeful that since it didn't happen in week 1, it would have materialized in week 2. Week 2, you say, okay, by week 3. So this thing continued. It continued solidly for, it continued solidly for 7, 8 weeks, but up to week 12, there were still people in the training who were saying that they still did not get a stipend.
Prof, you wanted to say something?
Yes, just for the benefit of doubt, that wasn't part of the research I did in relation to whether USF refunded CMU for the lunches supplied. So I will ask that you give us another opportunity. Let me verify that with Treasury Department, and to corroborate with USF if that was actually done. So I personally, I don't have knowledge of whether there was a reimbursement to you.
But
to
I
CMU
must
or
say,
not.
between USF and CMU,
And CMU, yes.
it's a litany of chaotic approach to handling this thing. I mean, you didn't have very precise numbers. You weren't given the names of the participants. You were kind of given a basket to carry water in delivering the program. And then the stipend was late. And so this put a whole lot of pressure on the persons on the ground to provide lunches. And that ultimately resulted in the situation we have now where the payments look extremely odd and they're not properly, the procurement wasn't properly done and all that sort of thing. Member Clark.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. You know, Mr. Chairman, as one of the members of Parliament, that is very integral in the whole scope of work as it relates to members of the unattached, those persons that we love to call unattached, but they are really Jamaicans within our constituency. I make sure that as many as possible from my constituency is a part of this program, because you must understand, and I will tell you again, that my constituency is 77% informal, if you understand what the word informal means, with all due respect. So I will support most of what Dr. Brown is saying, because I have been to more than one of these functions that I'm invited to speak to the youngsters on a whole. And you have persons coming from Westmoreland, coming to Montego Bay, from Westmoreland, Hanover, Trelawney. Mr. Chairman, I can understand all that you're saying about the whole thing looks a little bit chaotic and all of that, but understand when you're dealing with a certain set of youngsters that really you have to reach out to them to bring them back from that precipice. Mr. Chairman, and I will say to you, they at CMU is, and I want to choose my word very careful, they are very caring to the point that all that has happened and is happening, that they have to stand up for these youngsters. Mr. Chairman, if you have ever been to one of those functions, then your heart would be in the next place, because you would realize the people that CMU are really catering for in these programs, the CAP-PS and the CAP program. Those youngsters look forward to that stipend, whatever you call it. I agree with you. But Mr. Chairman, and on many occasions they will call me, they will visit my home, and they will say, boss, MP, Mr. Clark, we don't get with stipend yet, and I hit with the pen pan, we don't have nothing else, we don't have a job. And I have to find a way to assist them, to support them, just to keep them in the program, just the same, until they get the stipend. So I sit here this morning, Mr. Chairman, I can truly and honestly understand what Dr. Brown may have gone through with all of that situation. And I say to us today that in all that is happening, let us bring forth and put in front of us the youngsters, or these young people that we seek to recapture or to capture, to bring them back into a society that will say to them they will be able to live a normal and a formal life.
Thank you, Member Clark. I mean, I'd respond to say sympathies with the importance and the intent behind the CAP-PS or the TAP program. Certainly, as a MP for a constituency like mine, I can fully understand that. But we're a public accounts committee, so we're interested in the accountability for the use of public resources. Now, what is striking is that the arrangements to support this program, the administrative arrangements to support this program, were very poorly implemented. And it put tremendous pressure on CMU as a result, as the person's actually delivering the instructive material on the ground. So they were faced with a situation where the stipends were not being paid, which was not their responsibility, and there were all these youngsters who needed to be fed. Hence, arrangements had to be entered into. And we, as a Public Accounts Committee, are concerned with whether those arrangements were transparently done and whether the procurement rules were complied with or not. And we don't really have the information to answer those questions because it was done in a highly informal manner. Member Dunn, you wanted to say something?
Yes. Good morning, and good morning to all persons here. I'd like to also say, along the line of MP Clark, that I'm also a beneficiary. Some of my constituents are a beneficiary of that program, and I heard the word chaos being used. I think it's more not timely administration of some of the protocols that needed. Let me finish. Needed to have gone in place, and the point I'm saying is that we're always thankful of the AG and her work, because the purpose that we need to unearth is what are the deficiencies that exist and how can we correct those deficiencies. The CMU as an institution, I'm so grateful for that institution. And you can see again in Dr. Brown's presentation is a caring nature of even to go and use his card to purchase these items for these students to ensure that they have meal for that particular day. And this is just the CMU trying to do the work that the CMU has done, especially for unattached youths in this country. While we're here, and as members of these committees, we want to ensure that the deficiencies that exist from time to time is noticed, is identified, and corrected. That is our purpose, is to ensure that the public funds is spent in such a way. And again, I must say I'm grateful for the AG and the work that they do, but I'm also very thankful for CMU and the work that they do for Jamaicans.
Yes, Member Dunn. Yeah, yes, Member Flynn.
Good morning. What I heard, we're here really for transparency as a committee, and to make sure that the public purse, that we spend taxpayers' money properly. That is really why we're here. And what I heard this morning is, like everybody would have said, it's actually pure chaos that I heard. It was not handled properly. It was not administered properly. I do believe that the TAP program is still going on. Am I correct? It's still happening? To a lesser extent?
Yes,
no.
It's a different version.
And I think
TAP 2 is now up and running.
And, yes, we don't want to ever learn lessons like this. We don't ever want to just go about business in Jamaica the way, from what I heard. And, I want to know what has been put in place to remedy this situation. It's sad that we have to come here to listen to this, to say, what can we do now to remedy? I think something should have been put in place in the beginning. And yes, we do understand, as members of parliament, we do understand a lot of times young people drop out of programs that government institute for them for their own good, because there is an issue where they can't afford, whether it's a bus fare or lunch, etc. But I think these things should have been thought of and put in place, and where this should have never happened. And I really hope going forward, because we all want to help our young people, we all want to give them that skills training or that further education. And I think all of what I heard, I'm sure they were possibly, feeling a little despondent themselves, not having the lunch or not having their stipend, etc. But I want to know what have been put in place so far since this has happened, and what is happening now.
So is CMU involved in TAP 2 delivery?
Yes, Chairman.
And what is the what are the arrangements that are now in place for dealing with things like stipends and lunch and so on?
What we did for TAP 2, the recommendations that we were trying to make for TAP 1 were all accepted for TAP 2. The stipend arrangement kicked in from week 1. The program where there's no need for provision of lunch, so we are attending only to the instructional process. And TAP 2 is really running effectively. No chaos at all, because they took the recommendation that we were trying to put on the table for TAP 1.
So our quandary as a committee, as a public accounts committee in relation to TAP 1 is that we have no real way of knowing whether value for money was received with these lunches. You have indicated that there was a broad participation. Huh? In relation to the lunches I'm talking about. Sorry? We have seen, the procurement arrangements have been highlighted as not being proper. So, and we've not seen, for example, the invoices and so on that would justify the payments. We don't know. Dr. Brown has indicated that he's confident that value was delivered with the lunches. And I'm saying from a documentation point of view and to support it, we don't really have that because of the way it unfolded. And they were really delivering this, as it were, kind of behind the 8 ball, meaning that they had to be making these arrangements very hurriedly to deal with a situation that had unfolded because of the poor administration, really, by the, and USF has some blame in it as well. Yeah, Member Phillips is next.
But was there in the agreement with USF, if there was cost for lunch to be provided in that, or the lunch basically came from the coffers of CMU? Because I'm a bit confused, because if my memory serves me well, I remember Dr. Brown saying that his TAP program in Montego Bay, there was no lunch provided for that period, right? We were trying to determine which one of the CAPS programs lunch were, because this document that came from Ministry of Education that was provided to us at the committee here, speaking about the same CAP program, School of Advanced Skill, CAPS, NVQ, Level 1, where it has a field that says lunch arrangement. And many of so St. Catherine, lunch arrangement was made with the concessionaire at the nearby police station. Westmoreland, and this is training between 2016 and December 2018. Students were paid for Westmoreland, students were paid a weekly stipend, which the lunch was on no lunch, from which they purchased lunch on a daily basis. KSA, the Theological Seminary, which was relocated, which stipend was provided for those. You have here, and it goes on and on. St. James training took place at the CMU Freeport, January to October 2018. There was no lunch arrangement. Clarendon, and as Member Bunting said, it is, and said by Dr. Brown, it was a messy affair, because I'm still not clear. One, how many different CAPS programs were run through the period? How many students were trained during that period? Right? Now, it's something that we would like to know, to see how many lunches were, if we have value for money for lunches that have been provided, right? Because I'm getting one thing, that TAP program, that lunches were being provided for the TAP program at one stage, but then we were told that there was no lunch provided for the TAP program. The last meeting we were told that there was no lunches provided for TAP. Yeah? Especially for the Montego Bay, but yet still we're seeing Montego Bay being provided, lunches being paid for it. It is here, nothing. And if you look back on this letter that was sent to us June 16th, read the CAPS version that Dr. Brown had responsibility, had a cohort in Montego Bay, CMU Freeport satellite between January and October 2018. And then this from Ministry of Education, which was an earlier letter, earlier to say that there was no lunch provided. So I'm still trying to figure out, Chairman, and I think it would be useful. Sitting here, I'm not even sure if anybody had even a box lunch or a lunch provided. Yeah? I am not sure if these monies that have been paid out, if any lunch was provided for whatever cohort of students that have that joined the program. So, no, man, but even if you have knowledge of the program, even at the end of last year, there were still persons even calling to the media that they haven't even collected their stipend.
But at least it shows
that had not. No, so I am where the member is. Can we get, Chairman, a listing of the programs, the duration of the programs that was run under the CAPS and the TAP? How many students have been enrolled in the program? How many students actually completed the program? And how many lunches were provided? Because they must know, they must be paying for lunches to a certain degree.
We know how much money was paid out to these suppliers. What we do not know is how many students and how many lunches, etc. So that's why I'm saying we don't really know about value for money.
Because if I am to go by the list, you got your turn, member. If I am to go by the list, if I am to go by this list, Devon McQueen was a driver for the former minister, but he was providing lunches for students. So were there actually lunches being provided? So can we get, Chairman, through the clerk for the committee, how many programs between 2016 were run under the CAPS and the TAP?
I think we should focus on the 2018, which is what the audit report says, that January to December 2018, $46.7 million was paid to 15 lunch suppliers.
If that suits you, Chairman, then
so
I'm
make us
fine
focus
by
on that program.
If that suits you, I'm fine by that.
And
through that, for the amount that is stated here in the Auditor General's report.
Information. We would like to see, what CMU's records show in terms of what supporting documents were provided by these suppliers to justify these payments, and how many lunches were delivered. For that. All right, member guy.
Thank you, Chairman.
And we still, just to add to that, remember we still would like to hear from Eugene Williams on how these were selected, and from Optimum on how the others were selected.
Chairman.
Yeah, so Prof, the project administrator who selected the suppliers, could we just hear from that person, or maybe that person could indicate in writing how they were selected, and we can decide if we want to pursue it any further. But the 7 suppliers, how were they identified and chosen? What was the basis upon which they were chosen by him?
Chairman.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. Chairman, my understanding, and I'm speaking to students, some students who had gone through the program, that for this program, as we understand from the AG's report on page 24, ran for 4 months, from March to June 2018, the TAP program. Right, Chairman? Look at the table. Right. My understanding from students who have been on the program is that they got lunches for the first month. Just for free lunches for the first month. Now, the question that arises is, and Member Phillips asked the questions, were lunches really provided for the rest of the period? And if they were students required to pay for those lunches? And if they were not required to pay for the lunches, were the lunches actually provided for the other 3 months? Which, although we have a bill here suggesting that 4 months of lunches have been provided for the period. Can't say number, but the amount that is indicated in the AG's report here. So those are some of the questions that need to be answered, Chairman. But you will recall, Chairman, we're still on the matters arising because I have some other issues on the matters arising.
Yeah, we're still on the matters arising, but this has detained us for a long period of time. One question I want to ask members in terms of optimum. How do we wish to proceed? Mr. Martin is overseas. I don't know if there's anybody else from Optimum who is in Jamaica who could come and speak to the issues. He has said he's willing to attend by video conference. I'm not sure whether that procedure is permissible for us, even where the matter has been left by the Standing Orders Committee. Yeah. Members, any suggestions as to how we deal with Optimum?
Well, speaking for myself, if we could have him by some teleconference facility, I think that would be, not optimal, but better than nothing. It's amazing how many of the persons involved in these schemes are conveniently overseas when time comes for the PAC to interrogate them on their role. Because that's my prerogative as a member. Well, maybe you should look at the pattern. Maybe you should look at the pattern.
You're saying that the person is possibly telling a lie that he's not on the island. I don't like that in this meeting. I don't like when that is done, and I think you should not do it.
That's your interpretation of what I said. Perhaps you may know more than I do. And this is not a public servant, by the way.
Stick with what you're supposed to be talking about.
No, I choose what I talk about here. You have no influence on that. So don't even try that. Don't even go there. Don't even go there. Because you have absolutely no influence on what I say. No. You're not the chairman. I'm not in your caucus. I ask the questions I want here. I make the comments I want. So please, just...
When you're trying to be political or otherwise, I have all the right to say in this committee meeting just like you.
You have your right to say what you want, but don't interrupt me.
Just continue with whatever it is that you want to say, but start inferring that the person is not here because
if you want to defend scams and criminals and they want
whatever reason that you may think they're not here,
money, then do it in your time.
Stop it.
Don't do it in my time. Don't do it in my time.
So, members, please, let us discontinue this particular discourse and move on. So, the point that was made was not that persons were lying about being overseas, Member Flynn. It was that they were, when the time comes for their presence to be here, we're told that they're overseas. And that has been a repeated pattern.
The person is saying that if it is that we want to do a video conferencing, that they are available.
But there's no provision for that in the standing orders, as your caucus has ensured.
Yeah, and we don't even have counsel. I don't think Parliament now has counsel who can advise us as to whether we can proceed in that way, because the previous the lawyer who was engaged by Parliament has not been replaced. So no, the issue is how do we proceed with optimum, Member Clerk? Can we do it by video conference or not? That is the issue we're discussing. This is exactly what we're doing. Anyway, you're talking a lot of hoo-ha. Yeah, so members, I think we should find out whether or not video conferencing is a possibility, whether Parliament can facilitate that from the point of view of technology. And if so, unless there are any objections to us speaking to the gentleman from overseas by video conference, I think we should try and avail ourselves of that, since there's no other way of hearing from him. So we'll leave that with you, Ms. Brandon. Moving on, in terms of matters arising, the members of the committee had observed that the information presented to the committee by Ms. Hayden in relation to certain critical items such as high beam, steel, iron, and other assembly parts had been included in the original contract, valued at US $621,000 with Logistics Company 1, and that was in direct contradiction to what the Auditor General's report said in paragraph 3.26, that these items were not previously included. The Auditor General was asked to review her records in order to clarify whether the statement in paragraph 3.26 was in fact correct, since Ms. Hayden has disputed its accuracy and has indicated that the information which she had presented to the auditors showed that the items had in fact been included from the outset. The Auditor General made a request that the Ministry of Education and CMU compiles a list of all the areas of the audit report which they are not in agreement with, and forward this to her department so that she can carry out the necessary research and determine whether there are any errors of interpretation. This would also allow her to be adequately prepared to address those areas of concerns at our meetings. So that is, I think we raised that already, and that is an outstanding item we would like CMU and the Ministry to provide. A number of questions were raised at the last meeting which the Ministry had been asked to respond to. These requests were forwarded to the Permanent Secretary by the committee clerk. Correspondence was received from the Permanent Secretary on the 15th of June, outlining certain challenges in responding to some of the questions asked. This correspondence was forwarded to members on June 15th by email, and copies will be circulated during the meeting on June the 16th. Now, members, we have, I'm not sure, but I think that is this letter of June the 3rd. Is that what this is referring to? There's a letter from the Permanent Secretary to the committee clerk dated June the 3rd, and that is addressing one issue, which is the treasurer of the CMU's ability to be here. I'll read that letter. It's addressed to the committee clerk and it's dated June the 3rd. And the caption is staffing of the Treasury and ability to respond to requests for financial information from the Public Accounts Committee, PAC. In reference to comments made at the meeting of the PAC held on June the 2nd, 2020 regarding the caption matter, the chairman of the board indicated to the ministry the willingness of the Caribbean Maritime University to support the work of the PAC. However, he noted that the university is currently faced with a number of constraints, including the recent resignation of the treasurer, who has indicated that he was advised by his lawyer not to participate in the meetings of the PAC. The chairman also noted that although a new treasurer with considerable experience has been appointed, she is not knowledgeable about the transactions undertaken during the period covered by the Auditor General's report. The incompleteness of some of the records of some of the transactions during this period also poses a challenge in responding fully to some of the issues identified. Currently, focus has been placed on producing audited financial statements from 2016 2015-2016 onwards, as well as the budgeting process, which is not as it should be. With the limitations of the current staff, both in terms of number and capacity, emphasis is being placed on managing the current challenges. In light of this situation, the Council craves the understanding and support of the PAC as the institution focuses on producing the outstanding audited financial statements and tries to cope with all the challenges of the current financial year. The Council has undertaken to ensure that timely updates on the financial activities of the institution are provided to the Auditor General's Department. So, what I glean from this, though it's not absolutely clear, is that the new treasurer, what the chairman of the CMU is saying is that because of other important tasks at hand, the new treasurer is not available currently to come to PAC meetings. Is that the gist of it? Is that your understanding, Pierre?
Yes, Chairman.
Chairman?
Yes, Dr. Guy.
I find that unacceptable. There are some issues here. There are records at CMU, and we were advised initially that the new treasurer would have needed a couple of weeks, as if my memory serves me right, 2 weeks, to familiarize herself or himself with the documentation, and that should be here subsequently. We cannot accept this going forward, Chairman. It's an institution, and even if individuals leave, there is a responsibility on the part of the institution to ensure that these persons turn up at the PAC. The preoccupation, with getting the financials for the year stated is neither here nor there. They are important, but those are also issues that we need to have answers to. But there are other issues, and the other issues is whom the treasurer is what the treasurer should be here to answer, irrespective of whether the treasurer was there during that particular period or not. So I don't think the committee can accept this letter, Chairman.
Member Flynn, you want to say something?
Just to add, I see where the letter also states that also due to the incompleteness of some of the records, that's possibly why. Is there any way that the person can come to maybe, and so we can ask whatever would be pertinent or the completeness of whatever record is there?
As far as I'm concerned, somebody has to be able to answer for the CMU on the issues that arise from the Auditor General's report. Some of those issues are issues that the treasurer wouldn't be primarily responsible for answering. But there are other issues where that person would be the appropriate person to be answering the questions. Maybe that person can't give, perhaps there are missing records or whatever, but we should hear from that person if that is so or not, and we would like to hear what is being done to improve whatever problems have existed in the past. We want to assure ourselves that those are being addressed now. So we meet fortnightly typically, and it's a couple hours on a Tuesday morning. I don't think it's reasonable for the CMU chairman to be telling us that the treasurer can't attend our meeting. So I'm going to ask that you ask the CMU council to reconsider that position. We do have the ability to summon that person here if necessary, but I hope that that isn't formally necessary and that they can understand that we will require that person's attendance for the period that we are doing our work on the CMU report.
Mr. Chairman, this letter highlights another case of the unavailability of potentially helpful witnesses to this Public Accounts Committee. And I speak specifically to the second sentence in the first paragraph. that the recent resignation of the treasurer, who has indicated that he was advised by his lawyer not to participate in the meetings of the PAC. Since counsel is not here, but perhaps as a lawyer yourself, Mr. Chairman, you could explain on what basis would someone be advised by their lawyer not to participate in the meetings of the PAC?
I would imagine that the person giving that advice would feel that potentially the person could be asked things that could compromise them in some legal respect, and that it's not advisable for them to come here and provide any information that may subsequently be used against them.
You're talking the right against self-incrimination?
That could be part of it. Yeah.
Chairman.
Yeah.
As much as I trust your legal interpretation, could we get another opinion from across the side? You haven't paid the fee, sir.
Anyway, it's pure speculation because it's speculation because we don't know what advice the person was given. But in theory, if someone advises somebody not to come here, a lawyer, that would be a possible and plausible reason why they might be given that advice. As to whether they...
At some point, though, the committee would have to decide whether to exercise the subpoena power that we have. if on balance, the value of information that these persons could provide would be important to coming to any conclusions in our examination of the report.
Well, I think if we come to a specific issue, right, where that issue is raised or that matter is raised, we can make a decision then. But at this point, I would only reaffirm our desire that somebody who is knowledgeable about the financial control aspects of the CMU and their accounts, internal and so on, is present for our meetings. Another matter arising relates to the minutes of the meetings of the council for the period 2018-19, which have not been submitted to the ministry. Prof, this is for you. A request has been made twice on that issue. Where are you with the matter of the minutes of the meetings of council for the period before 2018-19?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Those minutes, we went in our records and were able to pull out the minutes, I think as far as 2012, and they were all sent through the ministry.
So I didn't catch what you were saying. Maybe you could just be a little closer.
The request from the last from the last meeting, and the letter sent to us was to provide the minutes of the previous board and the council of the university, and they were able to pull this from as far back as 2012, and they were delivered to the ministry, and they are contained in this document. Yes.
Good. Thank you very much, Prof. So that is delivered. All right. The last item in this sheet that was prepared by the class says the permanent secretary was asked to provide information on all arrangements for the CAP program that went through the ministry in terms of payment. The PS had indicated at the meeting that the ministry had only provided support for the CMU with respect to the original career advancement program, and stated that she would submit the information on what was provided by the ministry to the CMU for this program, along with the MOUs and other documentation. Has that been done, PS?
Yes, Chairman. This is contained in Part 1 of the document, and there is also a summary that is included on page 6, which would have indicated for the period from 2014 to 2019, a total of 117 million was paid to CMU for the administration of the Career Advancement Program.
Thank you. So that is in part one of the large document that we received
Yes.
today. Okay. And the last point I have is that, Prof, this is for you. You had indicated to us that the CAPIES program had been funded by HART NTA. You were asked if the CMU has an MOU or other agreement with HART NTA, and you had indicated that you would check and provide that. Have you been able to ascertain whether there was such an MOU or other document between HART NTA and CMU for the delivery of the CAPIES program?
Yes, sir. If you look at part 1 of the folder presented to you, and the information is contained on page 6, 7, as per the MOU and the response to the question that was raised.
Thank you. So that is in the document that we received this morning as well. Okay. So, members, I think we can...
No, Chairman, you can't move yet.
You have more matters arising?
Yes.
Just a minute. There is I want to draw your attention to something that was in the letter that was sent to us. HART Trust did not sponsor TAP. TAP was sponsored by Universal Service Fund. There are two entities that are involved. But in that letter, it was indicated that HART Trust funded both CAP, yes, and TAP.
Which letter are you referring to? A letter from
the
committee clerk? Okay.
From the committee clerk.
We understand that TAP was a USF program, yeah. Member Guy, you had something?
Yes, Chairman. On page 10 of the minutes, Prof said he was asked whether he was aware of any funds reaching the CMU in accordance with this arrangement with Optimum. He also questioned whether any members of the CMU were paid additional amounts above and over their regular salaries from CMU for doing work in respect of the CAPIES program. Prof said he was not sure, but promised to check with the Treasury Department whether the CMU had received any money through Optimum Customer Service Consultancy. He added that although he was not sure whether any members of the CMU were paid additional amounts and above their regular salary in respect of CAPIES, he would confirm that this was done in respect of CAP. He could confirm that this was done in respect of CAP. He agreed to carry out the necessary research and provide information at the next meeting of the committee.
Prof, that was one other outstanding item, the question of additional payments that paid to on top of over and above salaries for members of staff of CMU who were engaged in activities relating to these programs, CAP, yes, and so, TAP and so on. Have you been able to provide that?
Yeah, that was done, sir. We searched into records as far back as for CAP 2012 to 2019. The program is being suspended now by the Ministry of Education, and the response is also contained. Sorry, the response is also contained in this document. If you turn to page 7 of part 1, page 7, Roman 6, has the CMU received any money through Optimum Customer Service? Though I'm no longer acting president, I'm deputy to the president now. That will be corrected. Has indicated that there is no evidence. We searched all records in respect to the 30% in the MOU that Optimum is supposed to pay to CMU. There is no such record. Optimum has never paid any money to CMU. Item B there, that is A. The item B, were any members of CMU paid additional amounts over and above their regular salaries? Yes. You will not find this uncommon in any educational institution, especially when it comes to teaching and learning. Normally faculty members and other administrative staff within an institution, we have their regular workload, and where there are additional hours of work that is done, they are reimbursed. So I was able to pull such information through registry, and it's contained in the document as well.
So the document that you're referring to, is it in this bunch, is this in this tome of documents
The
here?
index indicates that it's page 650, I believe.
Can you read it,
Sure.
Chairman, in light of the fact that not all members here have a copy
Yeah.
of that? 600 and?
It's the very final page of the document, and it has a table with the employees listed by name. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 employees.
Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
sir,
Yes.
the letter we received from the clerk actually spoke to the CAPIES program, which is what is included in part 2 of the document. I, however, brought a copy of the schedule of payments that were made for the Career Advancement Program from 2012 to, I think it is 2018, sir. So I have a copy of this that I have brought for the CAP, which is separate from the CAPIES, which was what the clerk's letter spoke to.
So the table that is in the Part 1 and Part 2 document on page 650 relates to the CAP, yes?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it totals 2.77 million. It's split out into 3 periods. There were no payments in 2019. There were payments from October 2016 to December 2017. And then there was one person who was paid in 2018, between January and December 2018. So it's there.
And Prof, this is the sum total of all who were paid
Yes, sir. That's for CAPIES.
through CAPIES?
Yes, sir.
No, but this says
Not
CAP.
staff, CAPIES.
No, your document here says CAP. So am I understanding
What
that
page is that, sir?
it's the final page in this huge portfolio that you have presented?
Yeah, the heading, both the main heading of the page and the smaller heading below it makes reference to payment through CAP.
It's CAPIES.
It's CAP,
It
yes.
must have been an error, yes. It's CAPIES. What I have printed here,
So PS, in that longer list that you have, going back to 2012, as regards the period 2016 to 2019, does it include payments that are not on page 650 under other programs?
This is specifically for CAP, sir, which started in 2010 effectively. So
When did it end?
well, I did not do the cross-reference to see if the names are included because CAPIES is actually a later initiative.
So the CAP payments that started back in 2012, and when would they have ended? When did that?
Well, I have the documentation up to 2019, which was when the program actually ended. Where the CAP is concerned, there is an allocation in the budget since the program had started to be administered very late in the afternoons, and the CMU, for example, they also had a very early morning program as well. So there was actually a component built in the budget for CAP for the persons who are working above and beyond their regular duties to be compensated, and the records are kept by the institution, sir. So that's the framework that is in place for all the institutions.
Prof, can I ask you a question? I've looked at your list here, and you indicated that no one else was paid any funds for the CAPIES program.
in 2019,
This I'm referring to this page 650.
Yes, which is CAP, yes, not
Yes.
CAP, yes. That is correct.
Yes, can I ask another question then? Were any officers of the CMU paid, which is not reflected here? And I mean officers coming from the president downwards. Additional amounts for these, for the CAPIES program as additional salaries.
No, sir, this is all the available information from Treasury.
All the available information you have.
Yes, but this is outside of the individuals that facilitated the program. I'm talking of like adjunct faculty who taught on the program, but people who received extra outside of their normal salary is what is contained on page 600.
And who are these people?
Well, Ostrich Forrest, for example, is the former head of that faculty.
That meaning which?
Faculty of Advanced Skills and Professional Development, which
That's
is now headed
Mr.
by
Brown
now heads. Yes. Lydia Shaw, I'm not so very sure, and I'm not sure if Dr. Brown would know this individual. Joan Andrea Hutchinson was formerly of a CMU, but no longer with us now. Nokia Pinnock is still with us.
I think the members of the committee would appreciate what were their substantive roles at CMU as well, Prof.
Well, Nokia Pinnock, I think up to 2016 or thereabout, she was employed in the Treasury Department, but now she has a different responsibility. Radcliffe Spence, substantive responsibility was in the Faculty of Shipping and Logistics, but he also now provides support to that faculty. Leslie Morgan was administrative assistant in that faculty, but now she's been redeployed to the library.
Just in order to earn these amounts, what were the services that they would have provided? What were these payments compensating them for?
Well, as indicated earlier on, let me speak, for example, for Radcliffe Spence, who happens to be a lecturer. That additional money paid to him would have been extra hours that he taught. Just like Pierre said earlier on, maybe early class or late in the evening class. Normally, a lecturer has a total number of hours per week, which is 18. And if you put more than 18, you are compensated for that. It's a normal practice across the university.
So how do you explain the administrative assistant? They lecture too?
No, but sometimes you have the administrative assistant work on weekends, and we do pay them whenever they do.
And you said that Ostrich Forrest, Dr. Brown succeeded him. And why was he paid? Is it extra hours?
I would think probably not extra hours. Just for record purposes, I don't know whether some of those money relates to traveling. It is something that we need to check.
Should we ask that to be one of the to-do things to Prof? To check on that and report to the committee at the next meeting? Okay, because you're just speculating.
I'm just speculating, that's correct, yes.
Prof, I noticed that although 6 persons received payments from October 2016 through to December 2017, thereafter, for example, in 2018, the whole year, only 1 person received a payment. And in 2019, nobody received any payment. Why is that? Is it that they stopped working on weekends, or they stopped delivering additional lectures? What was the reason why, other than the 1 person who received a payment in 2018, all of these payments ended at the end of 2017 and weren't continued after that?
Well, just as a member guy indicated a while ago, I'm unable to provide that information. What I got from Treasury was just for them to establish for me how many people received extra money outside of their regular pay.
Chairman, if I may, sir, in 2019, which was when the questions were being asked and we were in touch with the auditors, the instruction was actually given for CMU to discontinue to complete the the special programs and to discontinue these programs. So I think it could have been about September of 2019 or thereabout that the changes were made. So students who were in training, they completed during the earlier part of the year. So for example, I think TOP ended in March and the new one did not start back in 2019 or later. And the other programs they had, sir, we had instructed that they should not continue those programs until we have completed the investigation and until there's a new framework within which there is the accountability for the continuation of these programs, sir.
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
What is curious, however, is that the Auditor General's report covered January to December 2018. In the report on page 24, in Table 4, January to December 2018, the CAPIES program, and then followed by the TAP program, March to June 2018. So I agree with you in the questions that you have asked, in that January to December 2018, there was no payment reflected here in the report from CMU. And if we are to accept that this is a period AG has reported on, then we are now being told that no one, as far as Prof can give us now, no one got any additional payment during that particular period. So we would need to get information on that, because this is what is before us, the January to December 2018. So we'd like some further particulars.
Where in the AG's report?
Page 24.
But that's dealing with the lunches.
Yes, the lunches for the CAPIES program. I know. But I'm saying that during that period also, that program, which is a CAPIES as well, this particular one, was going on.
Yes.
So we need to know whether. Right? So we'll ask Prof.
Well, this chart is saying that only one person received a payment.
I know.
Yeah. And which is strikingly different to what happened the year before, which is why I asked what was the reason why the payments were discontinued for the most part, other than for one individual in 2018. So perhaps you could look into that and just provide an answer. PS has explained what happened in 2019. All right.
But what Member Gary was referring to a while ago is not CAPIES. This is TAP. And that wasn't part of what I was required to investigate. This is CAPIES. And what you made reference to on page 24, the bottom there is TAP. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we can move from matters arising now, unless you have anything else you wish to raise, member. If not, okay, we can go back to the prompt. And we were going through the items in the prompt. I think we had dealt with the lunch suppliers quite extensively. We're still hoping to speak to the principle of optimum, if it can be arranged by Parliament to do so by a video link. And we've asked for the information, Dr. Brown, from Mr. Williams as to how the suppliers for the TAP lunches were chosen, what was the basis upon which they were selected. The next item on the...
Before, go ahead. Mr.
I just wanted to just refer back to the minutes when I stated that it was said, as it was on page 6, Chairman, Dr. Brown, he stated further that for all the locations in which the CAPIES program, for which he had responsibility, were administered, no lunch was provided to the participants, and therefore there had been no need to engage lunch suppliers. That is in the minutes itself when I was referring to what I said earlier about the lunch. So that is why I said there is still some, exactly. So, that's what I'm saying, Chairman, why I asked for that report. The duration of the program, when the program was administered during that period, that the Auditor General's report refers to, how many students was admitted in each cohort, and if lunch was provided for those students as such. Because, as I said, there is some chaka arrangement being made and some confusion in all the documentations that we have.
Yeah, and before we leave the lunch supply issue, this question is really for CMU. With respect to the letter from Optimum that explains that the LRI was delivered by Optimum as a community outreach initiative on behalf of CMU. And then CMU had to turn around and pay, I think, somewhere in the region of about $20 million for launches related to this community outreach initiative. So, and it's very clear from the letter that this has nothing to do with a business partnership MOU. Now, is it that anybody could have just taken up themselves as a community outreach initiative and started delivering LRI interventions, and then CMU would pick up the tens of millions of dollars of lunch payments?
I think that is a very difficult question for me to answer at this very point in time. But I think in response to your question, it may not be prudent on any organization to take on such a responsibility. But we may need to investigate further. But one thing I know is that the passion that Professor Pinnock had for the youth of this country, that could have led him to take that decision. But allow us to know.
When you're doing that research, or if you know now you can answer, were there any other companies that decided to deliver the learning readiness intervention as a community outreach initiative or as a goodwill gesture to the young people of Jamaica, that the CMU picked up the lunch cost for those other providers?
Well, I have no knowledge of any. If we recollect what Dr. Brown said here 2 weeks ago, he indicated to us that there are 4 versions of CAPES, and one of them is the learning readiness, which is administered by Optimum, and the other 3 administered by the faculty itself.
So the Optimum was the only entity delivering the learning readiness intervention?
Let me ask Dr. Brown if there is any other.
Yes, as far as I'm aware, the 4 versions, Optimum substantively attended to that particular version.
And since that is not what is covered with the MOU that was shared, have you been able to find any documentation between Optimum and CMU that covers the delivery of this learning readiness intervention? An agreement between, and whether MOU or some other form of agreement, outlining the relative responsibilities of the CMU and Optimum in delivering this intervention?
Not aware, again, member, of MOU agreement specific to that outside of the substantive MOU that's in place.
No, the substantive MOU speaks solely to the business partnership.
Yes.
That's a business partnership MOU. This is the goodwill gesture to the young people of Jamaica.
Right. What I know, there is Optimum has submitted a substantial report that went to PAAC copy I am thinking was submitted up to the PAC. I am seeing Professor Ibrahim with a copy of it right now.
Is that in the bundle that came out this morning? This report from Optimum you're talking about, this where you said this substantial report is?
That report was submitted way back when PAAC was in session. So that has been previously submitted.
No, but you're saying it was copied?
No, I'm saying a copy. I have seen a copy of it, and I'm seeing Professor Ibrahim now with a copy in his hand.
Okay. Well, perhaps you can respond then, Prof.
No, actually, I called for information relating to Optimum and its arrangement with the university, and apart from the MOU, this is the only document that I was able to obtain, which is part of the report that was presented to PAAC, which is PAAC, contained on page 594 of the document.
In this last bundle that I have not received a copy of. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I was a few minutes late. Will copies be made for the,
I think we
in addition to the 3 or so members who got?
Yes, we've asked for each member to be provided with a copy, ideally a bound copy, because the ones that we were given were unbound, and that would be very difficult to
unwieldy,
to deal with.
Okay, so maybe I will defer, ask that when we've had a chance to go through the bundle, Mr. Chairman, we could return to this at a future meeting.
Right, okay. So we can go back to the prompt, and where we were under the procurement and contracts management subheading, there was an item on computer equipment, and $10.6 million was paid to a supplier for computer equipment and other peripheral items without a formal contract or provision of any warranty. And there is no evidence of the fixed assets in the CMU's inventory records. Assets could not be identified by the Auditor General's department. The members, I don't know if you, I'm just looking for the section in the actual report that deals with the computer equipment procurement. That's procurement and contracts management is part 3 of the report, between pages 22 and 30. I think it's on page 36 of the Auditor General's report. So it actually begins on page 35, and it makes the point that 15 laptops and 2 tablets were paid for a total of $10.58 million. And Appendix 3, which is the Appendix 3 is on page 72 of the report. And the report makes the point about weakness in recording and identifying of these assets, the needs assessment for the buying of these assets, and the process for selecting and approving all were found to be weak. There was no procurement plan to guide the purchase or to inform the annual budget and allow for the streamlining of cash flow for each financial year. Pointedly, the IT requirements were neither determined by an IT strategic plan, and that's despite the existence of an IT department with 15 members of staff. The CMU and the IT department did not identify the specifications for the computer equipment that was purchased. Now, when one looks at this Appendix 3, these were payments made to Logistics Company 2. Logistics Company 2 for computers and equipment. Logistics Company 2 being
ITZ Ship 24/7 Limited.
Company called ITZ Ship 24/7 Limited.
The same company that provided the logistics services related to shipping, delivery, and clearance of materials for Block E. The same company through which demurrage charges paid to Assessment Recovery Limited through ITZ Ship 24/7 Limited for Block E. That was a 32.9 million in demurrage charges. So
that we have this company, ITZ Ship 24/7 Limited, doing a number of different things for which they're paid many millions. One is supplying computer equipment and related items. The other was logistics services related to shipping, delivery, and clearance of building materials for Block E, and that was 12.59 million. And thirdly, demurrage charges were paid through this company for Block E, and that was nearly $33 million. When you look at page 72 of the report, members, Appendix 3, on the payments that were made, the amounts seem very substantial. A 15-inch Dell touchscreen TV, $498,000, $764, and they bought 3 of those, totaling nearly 1.5 million for 3 computers. A Lenovo ThinkPad, $432,000. A printer, an HP printer, LaserJet printer, $383,000. A MacBook Pro, $539,000, and so on. 3 MacBook Pro 13-inch computers, $1.6 million. 2 Samsung tablets, $436,000 for 2 tablets. They must have been made from gold. Yes, member guy.
AG, would your team be able to tell us the specs on these MacBook Pros? Just curious. I mean, the prices are exorbitant, but I mean.
Right. No. Right. So the records through you, Mr. Chair, did not identify the specs.
Point made in the report at paragraph 3.34 on page 35. The AG says that we found weaknesses in the needs assessment selection and approval process, and recording and identification of assets. And in 3.35, CMU in its IT department did not identify the specifications for the computer equipment. I just bought some tablets for education institution in my constituency, and I bought them for $50 US each. Now that was a good price, but
even double that.
That is $6,000 to $7,000 each, and here we have CMU paying for $436,000 for two Samsung tablets.
Well, Mr. Chairman, apart from the outrageous prices, there is no evidence that these were ever delivered to CMU, because according to the prompt, there's no evidence of the fixed assets in CMU's inventory records.
It would have been difficult to do that in the absence of the serial number. Generally, an invoice would indicate the serial number for the product. That was not indicated, the specification. So there was nothing for us to uniquely identify the items.
But perhaps somebody from CMU could explain, when you purchase fixed assets or things like computer equipment, isn't there a process of taking that into the fixed asset register or the inventory of equipment register at the CMU, which would then record the unique identifiers for each of these pieces of equipment?
Yes, sir, there is a process. The IT department, under IT and technology and innovation, do have a record of all computer items, accessories, but during the audit, if I could remember, only 3 MacBook Pro were not found. But later on, we realized that one was with FID, and I think that Mac Pro is still with them now, but the other 2 we've not been able to identify. So we do have an asset register.
So you would have these 2 Samsung tablets that you paid $436,000 for?
Well, I don't know of that, but I cannot remember if a request was made for those 2 tablets from AG, but that is another question, whether they were really tablets, so I cannot answer at this point.
But in addition to this schedule in the appendix, Mr. Chairman, on page 36, it speaks to the fact that despite having access to the enterprise version of a software suite, CMU purchased 3 individual licenses from a third party, the same logistics company too. First of all, it's highly unusual for a company that is providing services related to shipping, delivery, and clearance also to be selling software licenses. But they sold the licenses at 10 times the regular cost. So CMU paid $256,900 per annum to this company for a software suite that they already had the enterprise version of. When they could have got the same 3 licenses for $25,000. So they ended up paying $256,900, 10 times the value of something. And it really is quite curious that normally these licenses you can buy them online directly from the companies, whether it be Microsoft, Apple, whoever the vendor is. You buy these things now online. And so the prices would be easily available to an IT department of 15 persons. but instead they go to a shipping and logistics services company, which is not normally in the business of selling software licenses, and pay 10 times for something that they had already had access to through the enterprise version.
It's
this is
a big
passing
rip-off.
strange.
I mean, the prices at which these computers are purchased and these software licenses being bought from a logistics company too, not from an IT provider even. When you have the enterprise team, this really needs further investigation, and I hope it will receive it. Is there anybody here from the IT department?
No, not at this moment.
Why was CMU buying computers from logistics company 2 and buying software licenses from logistics company 2 from a company called, what's the name? ITZ Ship 24/7 Limited. Why were they buying computers at these very high prices? I mean, bizarrely high prices, and some software licensing from this company. Why was it done that way, Prof?
Maybe I just reflect back to my responses to the previous questions. I never had responsibility for IT. This is something that we have to investigate. We have a vice president in charge of IT and technology advancement.
Is there anyone here from IT?
Nobody here is from
Nobody
IT.
here.
Nobody.
Is the person who was the head of the IT faculty or department or whatever it is, that vice president, was that person here at the time when these purchases were being made?
2018, yes. Yeah.
We would like that person to come to the committee. What is the name of that person?
Professor Noel Brown.
Professor?
Noel Brown.
Noel Brown.
Yes, sir.
Professor Brown, I'd like him to come and explain to us why this was done. Because on the face of it, it's very hard to understand why it was done. The Auditor General says, we were unable to determine the expertise and capability of the logistics contractor to deliver the computers. There was no evidence that warranty conditions were provided because there's no formal contract in place to govern the terms and conditions of the purchase. This is $10.6 million worth of IT equipment with no warranties, no contract from a logistics company. The company is not registered with the National Contracts Commission to supply computers, so they're not an NCC registered supplier of computers. CMU could not indicate how the company was selected in a context where the company was not selected on a competitive basis. CMU exceeded the Ministry of Finance's spending limit for computers by a cumulative number 9 dealing with laptop computers. The CMU presented no justification for purchasing laptops at a cost above $3,000 US each. The acquisitions were approved by the President without any input from the Procurement Committee. The circular says no approval shall be given for the purchase of a single laptop exceeding the sum of US $3,000 without justification provided and accepted by the entity's Procurement Committee. That was not done. And there's a table on page 36 of the report indicating what the laptops were purchased for and their equivalent in Jamaican dollars, and the amount by which they exceeded the circular in each case. And that they exceeded the circular in each case by fairly substantial percentages, region of 30%. And this section of the report concludes by saying, we noted that the logistics company only presented a sales receipt that listed the item without any identifying mark, such as a serial number, or the original invoices from the manufacturer or approved supplier. Further, a review of CMU's inventory records shows no evidence that the fixed assets were delivered, included in inventories and assigned to staff. As a result, we were unable to identify 4 laptops valued at $2.16 million. 4 laptops. This is really a situation which is extremely concerning. I move to the next item under procurement and contracts management, and this is project management. CMU incurred demurrage charges of $33 million related to the purchase of sandwich panels, as CMU failed to return the shipping line's containers as scheduled. Yeah.
Just a question. When the Auditor General was doing this report, did she actually see the equipments? Or were the equipments?
Yeah. Go ahead, Edie, sorry.
So my understanding is that the team checked the staff assignment listing, the fixed asset assignment listing, and what we saw entered, the machines were assigned in March. What we saw on the system, machine assigned in March, but the invoices were dated September. And so we could not relate the machines that we saw assigned to those which were acquired, which we had an interest in.
Oh, and it would have been made
the earlier March.
So we're not even sure where these equipment, because there was no log also for the serial numbers. So
so primarily what the report is saying is that we cannot attest for the right, because we don't see the CMU has indicated that the machines are there, and they may very well be there, but we are not in a position to confirm, because the requisite information that would allow us to do so is not available, and what is available, there's conflicting information.
So, Madam Pierce, since this report, has there been any assessment to
ensure that the serial numbers and all other pertinent information would be captured? It would be electronic, and of course items would be placed within the inventory on a receipt of the items that are purchased.
Yeah, but what would the professor be looking for if he doesn't even know what the serial numbers of the actual purchases are?
Yeah, that's what I said earlier on. After the investigation, we went further to search internally for these computers, but we were able to identify only one that was with Financial Investigations Department. And
you have only been able to identify one?
One, yes.
Only one of the list that is here?
No, of the three or four computers, as indicated in the report.
Yeah.
The MacBook
Pros.
The MacBook Pro, yes.
So have you been able to identify everything else, or?
No, I think everything else was seen by Auditor General's department. Those were the only items that were put to us.
My understanding is that the Auditor General's department is not in a position to verify that the CMU has this equipment, because it wasn't recorded and entered with use of any identifying serial number.
That is my understanding too.
So they are not saying that you don't have them. They can't say, they just can't say whether you do.
Those are the actual ones.
What we do know is that you paid for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but whether you have them, I don't know. You're saying that you're satisfied everything is there except for the 2 out of the 3 MacBook Pros.
Not that I'm satisfied, but based on the audit that was done and asset identification, they were unable to identify those 4 computers, and that is what was put to us then. But we were able to identify later on that one of them was with FIB.
What about the Dell XPS 15, the ThinkPad, and the accessories? Have you been able to identify those?
We haven't gone to do any search, but the presumption is that they have seen those items.
No, I can't presume in this instance because
they didn't ask us. They didn't ask us to produce those other items.
Prof, there's a list here that has been supplied to us in the Auditor General's report. Now, you are speaking about being able to identify one of 4 MacBook Pros. And my question to you, the listing that is here, the 4 HP laptops, you have a Dell 15.6 XPS laptop, another 15-inch MacBook Pro, you have 3 Dell XPS 15. Have those been identified?
Well, I will have to investigate further with the IT department, but as at this moment, I cannot say that is
Chair,
done.
Chair, I am a bit taken back because if this report has been given to us for quite a while now, and I would imagine that with expediency that the university itself would have tried to sort this out, I mean, to see if these were actually purchased or not. And for you to come and tell me now, Prof, that, well, received, because it has been purchased and paid for. But to you to tell me now that you have only identified one of the MacBook Pros, but you're not sure about the rest of equipment is unacceptable.
Yeah, that is to my best of knowledge, and I will investigate further with IT department. But from my recollection, those were the only 4 items.
So, Chair,
so we have an appendix in the Auditor General's report.
Yes.
It's on page 72.
Yes.
It's $10.58 million worth of computer equipment. And the Auditor General's report says that there was no proper recording of the inventory when purchased, okay? We are interested to know whether those items are in your inventory. Do you actually have them or not? You are able to answer in relation to one of the MacBook Pros that FID had it, but there's a much longer list here. It's not a huge list, but it's about, I don't know, yeah, it's a costly list.
It's a costly list.
It's a very costly list.
Yes.
I'm particularly interested in these $200,000 per unit Samsung tablet. What's the specification on this? Because this, I don't know, based on the exchange rate at the time, this would be somewhere between probably $1,600 to $2,000 each. And I'm, really interested to see the specifications, the model number, etc., for these Samsung tablets. So when you identify them, Prof, you could just describe the model number and the specifications.
Members, it's 5-1. I think unless there's any other business, we could wrap. Yes? Mm-hmm.
AG, can you tell us when the payments were made for these computer equipment? When the purchase was actually done? 23? Oh, from...
But most of them were February, March 2018. Mm-hmm. Some were in September, October.
Okay.
And there was one in May.
All right. Okay.
Which was...
But why I asked the question, Chairman, is that the AG said that there were some indication in some inventory dated March, but the matter related to a September purchase. So that's the MacBook.
All right, so let me just seek to possibly clarify what is being said, or to probably give an explanation. This aspect of the audit, I would say, evolved. So what came to the attention of the auditors, my understanding initially, was the MacBook Pro. And that would have been brought to CMU's attention. But arising from that, the audit, that aspect, the scope was expanded. And so there are other elements that came to our attention, We did not go in search to find those computers because the information would not have been there for us to validate the specific existence. So it is for that reason why it is being said that we requested 4. But the report then, the updated report, would have provided a longer list to say, look, we are unable to verify these. And why it speaks specifically to 4.
The 4 MacBook Pros were bought in September. 1 on the 13th and 3 on the 20th of September. All right, but most of the other items were bought in March, February. The 2 Samsung tablets were bought in October for $236,000. $436,000. 432. All right. Any other business? So,
just hoping that when Professor Brown, who we have invited to the next meeting, that at least some verification can be sought and brought to the committee on the whereabouts of these items that are mentioned in the report.
Just I'd like to ask Prof a question. Prof, when did you join CMU or CMI?
2008.
2008?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I asked a question, I think it was at the very first meeting, or the second one, and we arising out of newspaper reports that a new president or interim president had been appointed. Why is not the committee here benefiting from his presence here?
I think probably the letter that was written by the council chair would have expressed interest in that particular issue as well. He joined the university on the 1st of June. That is the interim president. He joined the 1st of June, and what he is doing presently is to understand the operations of the university, and on a daily basis he's having meetings and discussions with the various operatives at the university. So that is actually taking up a lot of his time now. Even though he has received a copy of the auditor's report, but
at some point we may want to hear from him.
Yes.
I don't think we need to hear from him yet. You know, he's new and he's getting.
But maybe at least he knows that we are going to want to hear from him.
Yeah, we may want to hear from him at some point to hear what he's found since he's been there and what is happening now in terms of trying to address all of these things. All right, members. Date of next meeting?
This is yours.
Today is the 16th. The 30th of June, next meeting? 30th of June? All right. Thank you. So moved. P.S. The listing that you have of the cap payments, can we get a copy of that, please? Yeah. Meeting is adjourned, members.
Social distancing aims to minimize physical contact between individuals and thereby reduce the possibility for new infections. The government has implemented a number of social distancing methods. These include closure of educational institutions, a reduction in the number of persons allowed at social gatherings, reduction in the number of persons in the workplace, measures for special groups such as the elderly, patients in hospitals, and the prison. Other severe methods of social distancing are quarantines or isolation. As much as possible, stay at home. But if you must go out, maintain a social distance of 2 meters or 7 feet. Stay calm, stay informed, stay at home.